My name is Diane Doubt, and I'm the Community Outreach Coordinator for the Lincoln Central Neighborhood Family Center. And we operate the Yes Cinema, and we are thrilled tonight that all of you are here for this really special presentation. Just for those of you who may not be familiar with Yes Cinema, this might be your first time here, or maybe you haven't been with us in a while, we do want to let you know that we're a nonprofit theater run by the Lincoln Central Neighborhood Family Center, and so every time you're here, proceeds from all of our concession sales and events go to benefit lower income families in the downtown Columbus area. So thank you so much for being here tonight. We also want to let you know a few upcoming special events we have. Opening this weekend on our big screens are going to be God Is Not Dead. This is a highly requested film. And the discount film for families is Lego. What a wonderful way to spend Mother's Day, but come and bring your mother to see the Lego film. And those of you who are independent film fans, coming soon will be Railway Man, and I know several of you have requested that, so we wanted to let you know that. And our classic film series continues the end of this month with The Maltese Falcon, which will be May the 31st, and then the summer series will be Jaws, The Wild Bunch, and Yankee Doodle Dandy. Now, the reason we are all here, Sherry Stark invited us.
Thank you.
There she is. Actually, we are here for a very special guest this evening. He grew up in Columbus. He's a graduate of Parkside Elementary, Northside Middle School, North High School, and Hanover College. There we go. He has run 31 states so far. And tonight we get to hear about his adventures and relish in his wisdom. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome tonight Brian Stark.
Like that. Can you guys hear me okay? Yeah. Well, thank you for coming out. This is really unexpected in more ways than one. I live in Tucson, Arizona, and my oldest brother Eric, is a conductor up in Indianapolis, and he was doing a large concert Saturday night, and I just didn't want to miss it, and I've missed a lot of them, so I came back for that. And when plans came together last week, my mom mentioned, Yes has been asking about maybe doing something, and I'd really love to do that. And she said, how about Monday night? And so it just happened, and the Republic got involved, and you all are here. So thank you very much for being here. This is really fun for me. It's like a homecoming like no else. I also want to thank Yes Cinema and Lincoln Central Neighborhood and Randy Allman for being such a great host. This has been a lot of fun. And seeing all your smiling faces out in the audience. By the way, how many of you am I supposed to know? Can you raise your hand? It's like the whole group, so that's great. If I forget your face or name, please just bear with me and say hi again, and I'll be nice. So I have like a three-part presentation tonight for you. The first is I want to help you understand better why maybe I do this unusual thing, running great distances. And then I hope to impart with you some of the knowledge I've gained in crossing 31 states. And then finally we'll enjoy a short film I made about my most recent run across the states of Wisconsin and Michigan, which happened last fall. And we'll save time at the end for questions. And afterwards, if you have more questions, feel free to come up and ask those of me. I've kind of taken on the name The States Runner, and so there's lots of information on the internet about my past trips and other films and stuff. So if you're like a lot of people I've met, the first question that comes to mind when they hear about someone who's intentionally leaving home and running 500 miles far away is that one word, why? Why would you want to do that? I'm hoping that you guys being here today might not have as much of deference to that as other people I've met, total strangers in the middle of Iowa, for instance. But you may still be wondering what motivates someone to do something like that. And a lot of tonight may help you understand, if you're a runner, how you can go farther. But I also hope that it will apply to other things in your life if you're looking for other challenges to seek or other hobbies to take up. This kind of stuff applies to everything. It's really mental more than physical. So when I talk about why, I think it's helpful to give you maybe just a brief overview of what led to this craziness that I'm involved in. And I like to give credit to my parents. So a lot of parents try to get their kids involved in an activity, and they might drive their son or daughter to the piano instructor and make sure they sit in front of the piano for an hour a day and pick up a skill. But my parents had a more unique approach to introducing me to the concept of distance running. It was about 1979, and we were driving back from Boston, Massachusetts. My dad had just finished the Boston Marathon. And I was young and got out of the van at a gas station to go to the restroom. And when I came out, it was the middle of the night, and I looked across the parking lot, and my family's van was driving away. And I thought, not good. So I started running. And I think that maybe was the start. And I ran really fast across that parking lot because we were in New Jersey in the middle of the night. And I was a young person. And I caught up to the van. My parents would have been very proud of me if they had known what was happening. And I actually caught up to the van and I smacked the side of it. And they didn't hear me. And continued on, went down the entrance ramp, and didn't stop. And it's not all bad, because they didn't get quite all the way home. It was about 5 hours later, in that episode when I was 7 years old, if that happened. And fortunately, some kind strangers came up to me and offered some help and got the state police involved, and everything worked out okay, and there was no charges pressed or therapy needed. But people asked after the fact, where did you go? What did you do? How did you get help? Did you go back to the gas station? Well, that would have made a lot of sense, but that's not what I did. I, in fact, continued on down the road because at the time my favorite show was The Incredible Hulk, and David Banner, as you all know, spent his life traveling the country, walking, helping people. And so I thought, I'm just going to be David Banner starting at age 7. So I was walking towards the entrance ramp at 2 in the morning in New Jersey, 7 years old, when these carload of guys stopped me and said, "Did your family just drive off without you?" And long story short, everything worked out okay. So that was the start. So then jump forward a couple of years, and I'm in 3rd grade. I'm an alum of Parkside Elementary. Go Pirates. Yeah, there you go. So at Parkside, I fondly remember my 3rd grade teacher, Mrs. Wiley. She was on the playground guiding the other students, and they were mastering monkey bars and playing Foursquare. And I remember, the expansive fields of Parkside. I remember asking for special permission to be able to have permission to run great laps around the big fields of Parkside. That was what I wanted to do on recess. And that's probably not normal. Usually that's a punishment in PE. But I enjoyed doing that, and I loved it when she said, "Yeah, go to that 3rd soccer field," and come back. And I'd ask for more and more and more. So then jump forward to middle school. Went to Northside and ran under Coach Jack Cooper on the track team. Anyone run for Coach Cooper? A few of you, there you go. So in the track team, I remember thinking as I was training for the 800-meter run, which is just 2 laps around the track, that I had to train by running 6 miles. I had to go for a 6-mile run as a 7th grader in order to be properly trained for 2 laps around the track. And so I did it. And I came home and told my dad, and I said, "Dad, I ran my first 10K. And I was 11 years old. And it wasn't hard, it wasn't difficult. I ended up doing more of that, and I graduated up to high school. I ran for Coach Rick Weinheimer and Jan Matchett, who are here tonight. Thank you. Lots of fun there. And I ran another 10K in high school, but this wasn't kilometers, this was 1,000. I ran my 10,000th mile by my senior year of high school, logging summer miles, winter miles, training runs, and races. And it was a great, great experience that just continued to evolve. And they really fed into that. And the summer training program, the Pavo running camps, McCormick's Creek, running 120 miles a week as a high school student was just incredible. And I found the further I went, the more I enjoyed it. So I just kept going. And I went to Hanover College. And any Hanover alums? There's 2 in the front. Yeah, there you go. Good job. So at Hanover, I discovered the beauty of all-day runs. And I could schedule my classes to have morning classes, and I would leave campus and run 30 miles along the Ohio River and get back just in time for the tail end of dinner in the cafeteria. It was just a fantastic existence. It didn't have the things that most adults have to deal with in terms of responsibilities. It was class and running. It was fantastic. And that was the setup for my big, big trips. And my first big trip was after college. It was a hard thing to graduate. It's lots of papers, lots of late nights, and I wanted something to look forward to. And I'll talk on this a little bit later, but I chose to hike the Appalachian Trail after college. And it's 2,100 miles from Maine to Georgia, footpath in the woods. And 10 days after college, my brother Eric, who's also here, drove me up to Maine and dropped me off and said, "Start walking." And 5 months and 5 days later, ended up in Georgia and basically completed that trail. And the more I did it, the more I wanted to do, and that led to running across the entire United States on the American Discovery Trail, which actually comes through Indiana on the Knobstone Trail and across Hanover College campus. And I finished that in 1998. And after that, I got married, and I've had some kids, and life's a little more challenging to take off for 8 months doing this kind of thing with a family. So I looked for ways to get out there, but in shorter pieces, and I picked off the Arizona Trail, and I ran across Nebraska, and single things. And my wife was the one who actually said, "You know, honey, looking at this map, you've already crossed half the states in the country." I said, "Yeah." She said, "Why don't you just finish the list?" And that one sentence has suddenly changed my life, because now I not only have the idea, but the support of my partner, who said, why don't you do this thing that you love doing? Why don't you keep doing it? Has anyone done that before? And I said, I don't know. And I started looking around, and I don't think anyone has. If they have, they haven't contacted me. So I thought that would be pretty cool. And then almost as an afterthought, she said, and why don't you do it before you turn 50? We'll call it the 50 by 50. Now, I don't know if she has a life insurance policy out against me or likes when I'm gone. I'm not sure, but she does support me. And so we've kind of tackled this as a family project. And the kids know that Daddy loves to run. I have 2 young girls. And once a year, I take off and run for 12 to 14 days across a state or 2. And so doing the math, I'm 42. I've got 19 states left to do in this major project. And that averages out to a little more than 2 per year. So my current plan is to knock off 2 states each year until I get near the end, and then maybe I can do a big push and finish them all either before I turn 50 or during the year of my 50th year, I'm not sure. So that's kind of what led to all this, and I don't know if that explains anything about my sanity, but that's how I got to here. And it actually started right here in Columbus. Because in high school, I had a favorite 10-mile loop around town that would come down through Noblet Park, and Mill Race Park, across the covered bridge, people trails, and came around the Commons before I went back north on Washington Street. And some days, when I wanted to feel like I was going out, I would stop at Sears and run through Sears and check out the TV section. Remember that? We had the video cameras, and I'd watch my form on the TVs. I'd go past Viewpoint Books and up the little ramp and past Chaos, and on a good day, I'd catch it when the cannonballs were coming by. That was exciting. I'd write that in my journal book, cannonballs. So I did hundreds of those laps. It was a lot of fun. But that started right here. It's kind of fun to be here at Yes Cinema, knowing where I had my foundation for all of this. So thanks for being a part of that. So that's just a brief overview. And now we're going to shift gears a little bit, and I want to talk about maybe some messages that I've learned from all those different trips. I have crossed 31 states now, and I've gained a lot of experience in the different things I've had to face and the mileage I've had to accumulate. So to couch this in a way that might be memorable for you, I want to take a little bit of hardship on a code or a series of letters that you may be familiar with. How many of you here run and maybe run like races or fun runs, 10Ks, things like that? A number of you. And so in a race, if you ever look at the results, there's so-and-so and their time, so-and-so and their time. If you scroll down to the bottom of the list, there's a group of names down there, and they don't have a time. Instead, they have a little 3-letter code assigned to their name. Does anyone happen to know what that 3-letter code is at the end of the list? DNF. There it is, DNF. Can anyone tell us what that stands for? Did not finish. So, yeah, I've kind of had a little bit of a hard time figuring out this. When you run a race, let's say the Indy Mini, maybe last weekend you were out running that. If you trained all year long, if you pointed towards it, you carbo loaded the night before, you read Hal Higdon's book, and you followed all that advice, and you had your pre-race ritual figured out, and you line up with 20,000 of your best friends at the circle, and the gun goes off, and you wait 6 minutes till you can finally move. And you start in that run, and you're giving high fives to hundreds of kids along the street there by the Children's Museum, and you get to the circle. All those things, it's fun, but let's say at mile 9 your knee starts hurting. You've had the race of your life, and at mile 9 things start to take a change. And you decide to walk it off a little bit. You go a half mile, you soak a sponge on your forehead or something. If it gets worse, and you decide you don't want to hurt yourself, and you're going to make the wise decision to drop out, does that make any credit for the first 9 miles that you've had? No. The end result is still DNF. And so when someone tells me, when I ask them, how'd the race go? Oh, I got a DNF. You know what my response is going to be? Instead of DNF, maybe we can shorten it a little bit. Let's make a contraction, like instead of did not finish, how about didn't finish? That at least softens a little bit, right? That's a little bit of an effort to make it sound not so bad. But nope, sorry, it's got to be official. Not is required. So, okay, maybe we can change it to something else like DS. Instead of did not finish, how about did start? Means the same thing, right? It's just a technicality that you didn't get to the finish line. So anyway, I don't like the fact that we're focusing on if you made it to the end or not, because that's really not the entire experience. So in an effort to kind of correct that wrong over the years, I've replaced those letters with something else tonight. So instead of the D being did, which is the setup for did not, we're going to have the D tonight stand for dream. And so for anything you want to do, you first have to have the dream of doing it. And so this can come from yourself, it can come from other people. In my case, this idea of crossing all 50 states, it wasn't even my idea, it was my wife's. She's the one who suggested it. And if you can be around people like that who inspire you and give you ideas, that's a great thing, no matter what the goal is. So that's a good thing. So dream and dream big. Another thing is think about the N. And in this case, N is not did not finish. Well, we don't want to think about the not, right? That's no good. So let's replace that with the word near. And so if you think about dreaming, the number one problem that people fall into, the pitfall, is actually dreaming too far away. And you get caught up in that word someday, right? We've heard that. That someday is almost like a death nail to any dreams that you have. So let's think about, when can these things happen? And sometimes that's a hard thing to pin down because it requires commitment, right? If you choose, I'm going to do it next year, well, that opens yourself up to failure, and we don't like failure. So you just say someday, and that's easy because you never fail at that. But sometimes choosing a starting time is just as hard as picking what you're going to do. So in the case of running across the country, I wasn't quite sure how to tell my family that I was going to do this, and so it was easier just not to tell them. So I made plans, I picked my route, I bought my gear, and it was getting pretty close. It was about 6 months away, and I thought, I should probably tell my mom that I'm going to run across the country. But, I'll wait just a little bit longer. And so it was about 2 months away, I think. I was getting pretty close. I had boxes of equipment lined up in my bedroom. And my mom came over for a visit. I was living in Brown County at the time. And a friend was over while she was there, and I stepped outside for a second. Mistake. My friend said to my mom, "So what do you think of Brian's big plans to run across the country?" My mom, who's never flustered or misses a beat, said, "Oh, I think it's pretty surprising." And then she followed it up with the best question of all, "When was he thinking of doing that again?" "Well, I don't know, March or something." "Uh-huh." And I came back in the door, "Brian, we need to talk." So set your goals and set them near. Make them happen. Choose a date. For me, on the Appalachian Trail, I chose to hike that because I found a mention of it in the school library when I was supposed to be studying for a test. It was my freshman year. And when I heard about this trail, it's 2,000 miles through the woods, and people eat out there, and they sleep out there, and they wrestle bears. It sounded awesome. I rode away, and I got a map of the trail, and I put it up on my college dorm wall. And I knew that after graduation, my reward to myself would be to go hike that trail, and 10 days later I did it. So you got to set things and make it official in some way. Choose a date, choose an occasion that's going to make it happen, and don't just say someday. So that's an important thing for near. The last one is finish. And when you finish something, that's a good thing, but if you don't finish, that's a negative that we don't want to attach to that experience. So instead, for F, we're going to say flexible. Because all of these things that we take on in life, you have to be flexible. Maybe your computer doesn't work. Maybe your car breaks down on the way to the wedding. Maybe your stitching class is canceled. Whatever happens, you got to be able to be flexible with it. And people who aren't probably have a lower success rate in the things they're trying to do. You just can't control everything. It's not even worth trying. So when you're flexible in these kinds of events that I do, it really helps out a lot. And I'll give you some examples. On the Appalachian Trail, everyone who starts that trip generally has an itinerary in mind. They want to hike 20 miles a day. They want to get to this point by a certain season. They want to pick up their box by Tuesday of food that they mail to themselves. Well, a lot of people start that way, and I started in Maine. And there were a large group of people, because the Appalachian Trail has a bit of a weeding out process. After about 100 miles, you kind of figure out who's there to stay and who's going to go home and stare at 5 months worth of Snickers that they bought at Costco. So there were 2 high school students hiking near me, and they were having a hard time because it was 5 days in and they had developed sores, blisters on their heels. And you got to take care of a blister, it just gets worse. But they didn't. They had an itinerary that they were trying to follow. And these 19-year-old kids had a lot of spunk, but not a lot of experience to dwell on, and they just kept up their pace. And they tried to go 20 miles a day on blisters, and those blisters turned into open wounds. And then they got blisters in the open wounds, and it was not pretty, and they couldn't walk. 19-year-old kids who were crippled on the trail. And they had to go home. They had to hobble to a street, hitch a car ride into a town, and get a bus and go home. And it wasn't a good experience for them. Well, I assume it wasn't. And I thought, well, I'm high and mighty. I'm going to knock this thing out. I've started at a good pace. I'm flexible. Here we go. And I made it all the way to the Georgia state line. And then my experience happened. Because in my confidence, I knew that I was going to finish at a certain time. So I told my grandmother, you can pick me up in Georgia at Springer Mountain at this date. I'll be there waiting for you. And I didn't take into account the cold weather. And if you've ever been to the Smoky Mountains in the fall, at night, it's really, really cold. Sub-zero or freezing temperatures every night. And all I had was a summer sleeping bag. And being flexible includes not only changing your mentality, but being prepared for conditions that might arise. And I didn't have that. I didn't have any winter clothing at all. So I was trying to sleep in a summer sleeping bag on the ground, which is dumb. I didn't have a winter coat. I wasn't staying warm during the day. I was cold at night. I wasn't getting any rest. And with 3 days to go, 80 miles out of a 2,100 mile hike, my body gave up. I was hiking down the trail. I knew I was going to be at the end in 2.5 days, and I decided to lay down in the snow. That's all I could do. I was laying down, I was looking up at the clouds, and I was wondering what was happening and why it had just taken me 4 hours to stuff my sleeping bag into a stuff sack, which usually takes me 30 seconds. It's just super slow motion. And while I was laying in the snow trying to compute all this and what's happening to me, why is this happening, a hunter walked by looking for his hunting dogs. They had a radio collar and he had this big antenna. It was one of those weird things that happens. And he said, do you need help? I kind of looked over at him. I'm not sure. I kind of want to keep walking, but I don't know if I can. He said, why don't you come into town with me? And he gave me a ride into the nearby town, and I got a motel room, and I just completely fell apart. My body just shut down. I had the flu, I had the stomach flu, I was dehydrated, I slept for 3 days, and I missed the last 80 miles. But that's not the end of the story. Because being flexible also means having a larger perspective of your time span. And so when I didn't finish that trail, I went home and did other things in life, and I waited 17 years. And 2 summers ago, I was with my family on a road trip. And we went all the way from Arizona all the way over to the East Coast, had a great time camping with the kids, and then at the end of the trip, they flew home, and I was alone with the van. And I asked my wife if I could have a few extra days to drive home. And I made a beeline to Atlanta, Georgia. I parked the van, I put on my pack, I had my running shoes this time, and I had the experience with me. And I ran those last 80 miles in 2 days and finished at 2 in the morning and knocked out this thing that I'd set out to do in 1995 and finished in 2011, 2012. So sometimes having flexibility means going with the flow at the moment. Sometimes it means being prepared for things that might arise. And sometimes it means being okay with the outcome because things might change later. So I hope that that kind of stuff can apply to you. One quick example about how being prepared at the moment, which is kind of funny, was in Tucson. It's surrounded by 4 mountain ranges that go up to 9,000 feet. It's a stunning place, love it. When I go for trail runs up in the mountains with some other people, and last fall I was on a trail run with guys and girls, and we have temperature swings of 40 degrees pretty much every day. At the dawn it's around 40 degrees, and they can go up to 90 in the middle of the day, and then back to 40 at night. And so you try to dress in layers. But one person in the group, this female, somewhat new to trail running, wasn't ready for that temperature change. And we started out in the cold, and we ran up the mountain, and we were running on the south face where the sun was shining, and it was an exposed face, so the sun was pretty intense. There was no wind at all. And we stopped at a trail junction to gather the group and make sure everyone was okay. And she jogged up and she said, oh, it's getting pretty warm. Got my tights on, but I forgot some shorts. Does anyone mind if I run in my thong? And 11 guys standing around found themselves saying, well, if you need to, do what you gotta do. So I think she dropped back, and the rest of the group took a while getting up the mountain that day. So you gotta be flexible, you gotta be ready for things like that. And the more prepared you are, the better you're gonna be, and the more you're going to enjoy it, and the more you're gonna do. So those are a few messages I have about that. Anyone have any questions about that kind of content so far? I'm just about done with my speech portion, and we're going to see the video in a second. Anything you guys want to hear about injuries or food or training or experiences or races, I'm happy to touch on. Yes?
How do you plan to run across Alaska?
That's a great question. She asked, how do I plan to run across Alaska? So, I don't know. But I have an idea. I would like to run the Iditarod Trail, which is normally snowpacked for the snow dog sleds. And I've heard that in the winter, of a good winter, it's packed ice, and you can run it in running shoes if it's a good cold winter. So if I'm able to get to that point, I'll save that for one of the last ones. I'd like to run the Iditarod, which I think is 800 miles, I'm not sure. And I'd have a crew with a snowmobile, and they would have food and water and help me get across the state that way. But that's a little bit down the road, but I have gears turning for that, for sure. Good question. Any others? Yeah.
What's your worst running moment so far and your best running moment?
Oh, thank you. Good question. My worst running moment, a few to choose from. I think it would be the first day, which is probably one of the best as well. So the first day of my run across the country, my brother Eric, who's kind of made a tradition of driving me to the start of these things, he drove me out to Delaware and kicked me out of the car there to start running across the country. And it was a cold spring day, March 8th, 1998, 42 degrees with huge surf and blowing rain. And again, I didn't have all the right gear. I was expecting summer in Kansas. I wasn't planning for winter in the East Coast. And when he said, okay, good luck, call me from a payphone if you want to give up. And it was like a teasing comment at the time, but that hung in my ears for quite a while. And I went through the first town, 10 miles, okay, I'm getting wet, getting cold, not much fun yet. Got to the second town, maybe I'll stop for the night, no motels. Got to the third town, there was a motel, but the man who owned it was having gallbladder surgery and he couldn't answer the door. So I just had to keep going, there's no place to stay. And I got to a state park and I was just looking for a shed to go in to spend the night. And all I needed was a little bit of time to find the next payphone so I could quit this crazy thing I had attempted. And I knocked on the door of the manager's house of the state forest, and this guy opened the door, and I just basically melted. I said, my name's Brian, I'm running across the country. It's my first day. Do you have like a garage or a shed or something I could sleep in? And he just picked up on something, and maybe he was an angel, I don't know. But he said, I think we can get you a place. Hop in my truck. Okay. I got in his truck, and I thought he was going to drive down the main road and out to some town nearby, but instead he turned into the backyard and drove across this narrow 2-track lane into the deep, dark woods. And I'm starting to think, maybe not such a good idea. We went around, thank you, Banjo. We went around the bend, and within about 100 yards, I was greatly relieved to see this huge barn, looked state-of-the-art, beautiful, well-built, new construction. I said, oh, that would be perfect, thank you. And he said, just kept going. Down deeper into the dark woods. And we came around another bend, and this time we opened up into a small parking lot, and there was a huge lodge. Turned out to be a $1.5 million lodge, and just been renovated. And he said, would that work for you? 2 kitchens, 3 fireplaces, 4 bedrooms, some yoga class had just left, and there was still a fire going in the fireplace. Just amazing, and yeah, that'd be great. I went in there and I sat down next to the fire and I just started crying. It was just, I was soaking wet. I had almost quit, and I knew at that moment, sitting in front of that fire, because of that man, Lloyd Simmons, the manager of the Redden State Forest, that I was going to make it all the way to California, because there was nothing the remaining 4,770 miles was going to stop me from doing, because I had survived that first challenge, and I knew I was going to make it no matter what happened. And then the knock on the door came. I said, hello? And he opened the door and he said, I noticed you didn't have much food. You got a little hip pack there. You can't have much food. Do you want to come have dinner with us at the house? Well, that'd be great. So his wife made lasagna and salad, and we got to watch myself on the news. A little crew had caught me on the road and did a little film segment, and it just sweetened the night, and I went to bed knowing that I was going to make it. So that was both probably the worst and the best experience. Thank you. Yes?
Have you ever had people start following you like Forrest Gump?
I've had a dog, several dogs follow me. One followed me for 9 miles in Ohio. And I was going all the way to California. I said, look, buddy, you don't want to follow me. I've got 3,000 more miles to go. But people, I've never had people, well, no, that's not true. In Nevada, I was running across Nevada for the second time in 2011. And this was when I set the record for the fastest crossing in Nevada on the American Discovery Trail. That route crosses 11 mountain ranges, and I finished it in 11 days, 7 hours, and 28 minutes. It was like 40 plus miles a day with 5,000 foot climbs every day. It was pretty arduous. And on that trip, I was 5 miles from the end, and I was feeling really good. The endorphins were kicking in. My body was a mess, but I was just going on fumes. And 2 high school kids were out for a little run, and my crew said, hey, see that guy? He's running across the state, and he's about to finish. Go run with him. And so they tagged along. It was a lot of fun. I got a great picture of me and these 2 high school kids asking me questions about training, and here I am blasting out the last 5 miles of this run, so that was fun. On occasion, I'll have people join me, but usually it's arranged. They find me on the internet, and they hear I'm coming through, and they try to link up. But it's more animals than people. Yes?
How are you going to run through Hawaii?
That's a great question. I'm looking forward to Hawaii. My plan right now is to, I think there's 6 main islands, 5 or 6. If I have the time available, I'd like to run around each of them. But I know that the Big Island is, I think, 800 miles around. It's pretty big. So I'm not sure about that, but my plan, ideally, would be to run around each of the main islands and just kind of tour them that way, because that's where the roads are. Looking forward to that one. Yes?
When you're on the trips crossing the states, how far do you usually run a day?
Great question. So that's kind of evolving. When I ran coast to coast, I could do about 30 to 35 miles a day pretty easily and wake up in the morning and do it again. And that's the whole thing with this kind of travel. You got to think long view perspective. So yeah, you can maybe run 48 miles to now or tonight, but tomorrow can you get up and do it again? And that's the day after day you have to have the view for. So now my state runs, I'm able to beat myself up a bit more because I only have to survive about 12 days and then I can rest up when I'm done. And I found that recently I can cover 40 miles pretty well, pretty easily. And I'm looking at pushing that towards 50. I think maybe this summer I'm going to try to do 50 a day if the elevation's not too crazy. It's like everything else with training. You want to go incrementally upwards and see what your body can tolerate. And I think I'm close to 50 at this point. Yes?
So what's this summer?
This summer, I'm going to run across the states of Oregon and Idaho. That'll be my 32nd and 33rd states. In Oregon, I'm going to follow the Pacific Crest Trail from California north to Washington State. And then for Idaho, I'm still mulling it over, but I'd like to run this beautiful trail in the northern section. The downside is that that's the shortest path across the state. I don't want to be dinged for cheating. So there's no rules for this. There's no competition really, but I don't want people to say, well, that didn't count because the trail's really only 70 miles. So I'm considering maybe running an extra 100 miles up the border and then another 100 miles down, and then maybe 270 sounds a lot better for Idaho. So those will be this summer. Anyone else? Yes?
Yeah. Do you have any supporters or do you finance this yourself?
Great question. So I have product support. I have companies. There's a running company in Nevada called Red Rock Running Company, and they supply me with my running shoes for these events. My energy supplements, I drink Hammer Nutrition supplements, which is kind of like a thick shake. And I drink that when I'm running if I can. It keeps me going. And take some of their energy supplements. They provide that stuff to me. Pretty much everything else, some of my gear is donated by a company called Summit Hut in Tucson. But everything else is self-funded. Although last year, I tried out Kickstarter. You guys familiar with that? Crowdsourcing service. It's a website, and you create a project, and if people like it, they can back you by donating some money, $5, $100, something like that, and then you create little incentives for them. And so I did that for my last run last year across Wisconsin and Michigan, and the DVD you're going to see today, the documentary, was funded through that project. It was really great. Some of my funders are here tonight. And they have a bandana on as one of the gifts, and bumper stickers and things like that. So I'll be doing that probably some more as I make more films, and that helps cover the expenses. It's not really an expensive form of travel. It's not like a cruise. You know, there's no added duty fees or anything. It averages out to between $2 and $5 per mile. That's kind of the amount that I figured out, depending on how fancy you want to get with motels and things. I prefer to run without a crew if I can, because that opens it up to adventure. Because when you get in the middle of nowhere with no help, you've got to figure something out, and that's where good stories happen. But if I'm in a really remote area like Nevada, you have to have a crew, and I'm lucky to have some good people come out and help me. And I will have help for Oregon this summer. It's going to be great. Yes?
Have you tried Texas yet?
I haven't tried it yet, so your guys are hitting all the hot buttons on the big states. I'm looking forward to the end of this series if I can. I'd like to run across all the states except for Texas, Alaska, Hawaii, and one more. And my goal would be to start running Texas in the maybe late fall or winter when it's not incredibly hot. Go directly from there up to Alaska and run that in February when it's nice and cold. And then fly to Hawaii and do all 5 islands in the spring. And then fly directly from there to Rhode Island. And finish off the smallest of all. That would be my ideal finish. And I think I could have a lot of people run alongside me for that. That'd be fun. So thanks for all these questions, and after this film we can certainly ask more. I can tell you more stories about all kinds of unusual things, but I want to get going on the film. It's pretty short, it's about 16 minutes long, and I want to tell you kind of how I made it. So this film, I used 2 different cameras. I used what's called a GoPro. Maybe you're familiar with them. It's a really high resolution video camera, and it has a chest strap that I can wear. And this is the first state that I've tried using this device. But it clips on, it stays pretty tight, and you can have it record continuously, but that drains the battery pretty quickly. So normally I would keep it off. And when I see something interesting, maybe about to happen, I'd turn it on and get ready to take some footage. So for a lot of the footage, I'm wearing it, and there's a little bit of jiggle in the camera, and I was able to take some of that out in the editing. But what worked out even better was I can take the camera off this harness, and I have a long telescoping pole. And you might think, who wants to carry a pole for 500 miles? But this pole is plastic and it weighs 2 ounces. It's like a butterfly. And I can hold that with the camera facing me and run at the same time. And so I was my own cameraman. And it worked out really well. No doubt it would be better to have my own camera crew, but I just don't have that at this time. So it worked out pretty well for that, and I could take all kinds of aerial shots. I could hold it down low, and you'll see different footage like that. Some of the other times I use my iPhone, and the iPhone camera is incredible, and I used it for some video. I also have a small tripod that you'll see in the film, and I can set the camera up, whether it's attached to something or just sitting on a surface, and then film myself, and that requires going back and getting it and keep running. So that's how I put all this together, and I hope you'll like the product. I'm still evolving with this because it's the first time I've used the GoPro. It has a waterproof housing on it, and I learned a bad mistake in this first year of using it. The waterproof housing cuts out most of the audio, so there are a few scenes where it's kind of hard to hear, and so I have subtitles for that, but for the most part you should be able to hear what's happening on the screen and figure out what's going on. So I think at that, we'll get the film going, and I hope you enjoy it. Well, what do you think?
Great job.
Thank you. Be happy to take a couple of questions. I was just thinking as I was watching the film, a couple of things that came to mind as I was thinking of Richie helping me out there in the state. There was an incident in Nevada when my mom came out for a week when I was running across the country the first time, and she helped me out for a week, and then she went home, and then my girlfriend, who became my wife, came out for another week, but that was it, and I still had a big chunk of time when I didn't have any help, and it was still 120 miles between towns. And I wasn't sure how I was going to do that. So my wife actually drove ahead 5-mile increments and left a water bottle at every 5th mile post. And it had a little note, like, love you, good luck. I'd run along, and a day and a half later I'd see her footprint in the shoulder of the road. Aw, little note from her. It was so cute. But then the last bottle came, and I was out of water, and that was it. And I wasn't sure what to do. And when I was just out in the middle of the desert with no water, middle of the summer, a car pulled over at the moment that I needed it most, and hacky sacks started flying out the door, and frisbees. There was my friend Yuri, who's here in the audience somewhere. Where are you, Yuri?
It was Utah.
Utah, it was western Utah, and he and his friend Kevin were here in Columbus and bored one summer day and wondered what Starkey was doing. So they called my mom and asked, about where is he right now? She said, I don't know, Utah, Nevada, somewhere. So she kind of gave them a few roads to look at, and they drove for 2 days straight and found me at the one moment that I needed someone more than anything. So thank you, Yuri, and everyone else who's played a part in these over the years. So do you have any questions for me at this point? Yes, in the back.
Do you ever get lonely?
Do I get lonely? I don't actually. The only time I might a little bit is when I enter a town and I'm looking for some services, like a restaurant or a motel, and I ask for help, and people will assume that I'm homeless. And in that moment, I want to say, I've actually run 400 miles to get here. I have a credit card. I'm not homeless. But the part of the journey never gets boring because there's always some interaction happening, whether it's cows or geese that chased me one day in Colorado, a dog that followed me for 9 miles in Ohio. There's always something to look ahead to, and if I remember feeling lonely, I just keep going because there's something about to happen up ahead, and so that's kind of my outlook on life with that. It's a good question. Yes?
How many calories do you have to consume?
Oh, good question. When my body is on full steam, and that takes about 5 days to get into trail running shape when I'm out there, you can't really prepare for stuff like this. You got to get out there and spend a few days doing it. When I'm really turned on in terms of my appetite and my energy, a good dinner would be what I call the trifecta in a town. A small town like Kansas will have a Pizza Hut, where you get a salad bar, and a full, large pizza with 5 toppings and a pitcher of soda. And after you eat that, you go to Dairy Queen next door and get a big Blizzard. And you eat that on your way to the Circle K. And that's the third piece of the trifecta. And you can get maybe 4 king-size candy bars and a pint of ice cream for the nighttime. And then you drink like a gallon of water to wash it all down. That's a good dinner. And just keep doing that over and over. Yes, sir. Randy.
What are you going to do after you finish 50?
Oh, God.
Start over.
You start over. There's other continents. I'm really intrigued by Europe, and Scotland sounds kind of cute. But we'll see. We'll take one thing at a time. But I know that it's not just the U.S. Yes, sir.
What's the creepiest state you ran in?
Oh, good question. West Virginia comes to mind. Not to badmouth them, one of the nicest states I've ever run across, but there is a couple of different reasons I might mention West Virginia. There was a family called the Crystal Brothers who lived on the side of the railroad tracks in a shack that they built out of pallets, and people cautioned me against the Crystal Brothers, and I saw them one day. They were covered in soot walking up and down the tracks looking for things to burn in their shack, and they burned tires, and they burned mattresses, they burned anything they could find to make heat and cook on, and that was interesting. But then also there was a section of train tunnels in West Virginia on the North Bend Rail Trail. It's 72 miles long, there's 37 trestles, and I believe 9 train tunnels, and some of them are a half mile long. So you get into this thing, and there's no tracks, there's no chance that a train's gonna come, but you're always just wondering when you can't see anything but this tiny pinhole at the end, what would happen if? I mean, anything could happen. Someone could jump out from the side, there could be a snake, there could be a bear, who knows? A stray rock would do you in. So as I was thinking about this one day, there was 2 guys who came out to run with me. They were reporters who wanted to do a story on me and also train for a marathon. And what a great opportunity, because they just ran with me for the whole day. So we're running through these tunnels together in West Virginia, and unbeknownst to them, the one toy that I had in my hip pack was a very small 1-ounce harmonica. Actually, I think Troy's here, his mom gave me this harmonica, I believe. And I took that out without them knowing it, and in the tunnel, just when you're starting to think, there's that awkward silence, like, I wonder if something's going to happen. I pulled that out. These 2 guys leak sideways. It's a lot of fun. So West Virginia might have been creepy for other people, too, because of that. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am?
Do you train all year round?
I should. I really, I love running. I feel so free when I do it, and I love to do it, but I also feel selfish if I neglect my other responsibilities. And I am kind of the homemaker at home. I take care of the kids mostly, and I do the cooking and laundry, and I enjoy doing that. And so I know that the trade-off is the running is the thing on the back burner through most of the year. So no doubt I would be more comfortable on day one of all these trips if I did go out for a regular run. But I have a treadmill, and I do my Netflix at night on occasion and just try to keep a little something in the oven there. But in general, no, I do maybe 2 or 3 long runs in the winter to just kind of remind myself what it's like. For instance, my birthday's in February, and this last spring, February, I ran from Tucson halfway to Phoenix, and there's a prominent mountain there called Picacho Peak. I was always curious what it's like to run to it, so I did. It was 42 miles, and it was fun. But I do that just every few months just to see what it's like. Yeah?
How do you train before big runs?
Well, I'll tell you how I trained for my first big run when I ran across the country. I was living in Brown County, and I was living in a log cabin, and I was substitute teaching. And that was a perfect setup, because I didn't have any materials. All I had to do was show up and take care of the kids for the day. So I put my teaching clothes in a hip pack, put on my running outfit, and I ran to school. And every school has at least a staff bathroom, if not a shower facility. I cleaned up, changed into my teaching clothes, taught for the day, and then ran back home. I got some money for working. I learned how to run with a hip pack. Didn't spend a lot of money, and it worked out really well. The trick with the solo stuff is you got to get used to wearing a pack, and there's a lot of weight there that your muscles and your body has to get used to, because you can get some big bruises, and it's a different kind of balance running with a 10-pound backpack. So it's something you got to get used to. But there's really nothing like training when you get out there.
What was the hardest part of the Appalachian Trail?
Oh, good question. Well, most people, like 90%, start in the south and hike north. You have a longer window, but because of my college graduation, I couldn't start till June, and so I had to start in the north to give myself the warmer fall in the south. And because of that, I think I got the hard stuff out of the way. People say it gets harder as you go north. I think it gets harder when you start. It's a hard trail, but it's beautiful. And the White Mountains of New Hampshire, Mahoosic Notch, the 100-mile wilderness, that's the first thing in the Appalachian Trail in Maine. You start at Mount Katahdin, and you don't have any access to get off for 100 miles. And that's a pretty harsh introduction, especially in the summer. They have little black flies that will eat you alive, and you are literally running through dinner and just trying to eat and keep moving and keep them off you. And some people actually erect their tent and put it over them and walk around inside their tent just because it's bad, really bad. So that would probably be the hardest part. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
How are you choosing which states you run when?
Great question. I choose my states just by invitation. So some people want me to go to a certain state, and I have 19 to go, so there's no real order to it. But I also have friends who want to be a part of this, and I think that's partly why you saw people in the film interested in meeting me and coming out and driving great distances to find me. I don't think that it's so much about me or my personality. I think it's what I'm doing. And none of those people probably ever want to run 500 miles, but I think we all look for something else in life, something that will make our lives better and bigger and know that we're helping other people. And I think every one of those people in the film you just saw, in addition to the hundreds of other people that have helped me out, I think they're all looking for that one extra thing. We want to be a part of something big. And I totally acknowledge that what I'm doing is not me. It's this idea that is supported by a huge network of people all across the country. And it's with their help that I've been able to do all this and continue to do it. And it's so funny because I meet people in restaurants. Aren't you worried? Don't you carry a gun? You know, I've never, ever had a bad experience with anyone in 31 states. And you watch any news program and you hear a much different message. And so I think you really got to get out there and see what America's like for yourself in whatever format you do. And I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. So that's how I choose my states. Whoever wants me to come and where the season works out. Yes.
Are you journaling on each trip?
I do, thanks. So I have a website, statesrunner.com, and I have a blog from that, and I have a Facebook page. And on the runs, I'll update if I have cell service, and I'll do little short 1-minute videos of, oh, look at the funny guy I met, or look at the water source I drank from today, and that's been fun, because I get the interaction, and I get people joining me on the trip from their cell phone in the car. It's a lot of fun. Don't text and drive, kids. But I also, on some trips, I'll take an actual notebook and write. I haven't done that the last few years because I relied on the social media, but then I have less of a record of it. So maybe I should go back to writing, physically writing. It's a hard thing to do, to live with yourself for the day and then go back to a motel room or a tent and then relive it on paper. You really want to just do the next thing, so you really have to go back and work at it. But it's important. Yes?
You've talked about your trifecta eating. Do you actually gain weight on your trips?
I've never gained weight. I lose everything I have and I come home like a stick. So if you're looking for the right diet plan, run 40 miles a day for 12 days and eat anything you want. Anyone else? Yes?
Have you run the Knobstone yet?
When I ran across the country, I was on it for about 30 miles, and it was incredibly rugged. It's up and down and muddy and slippery and really quite challenging. But I haven't done the whole thing. Yeah. So I think we're about at our time. Diane, are we doing good?
We're good.
Yeah, so if you have any more questions, if you want to meet me out in the lobby, I do have books out there. Those are mostly about my run across the United States. I'm happy to sign one to you. But I encourage you to follow along because it's going to continue to be interesting for the remaining 19 states or whatever happens. I'd like to think my family has bets on when my knees will finally give out. So far, so good. Knock on everything. So thank you so much. This has been a lot of fun. It's a great crowd. I really appreciate you coming out, my parents and all my relatives, brothers, and family. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Brian. I think we're all going to think of when we see D and F at the bottom of a list very differently, and it's been a really fun experience. Brian does have books available. They're only $15. He'll sign them, so please stop. Thank him. Thank you all again for coming this evening, and please thank Brian, the States Runner, one more time.